Hello, football tribers. Welcome back to the channel. I did miss you a lot. It's been a while since we last engaged on here because, as we all know, life happened. But in that time, we've missed quite plenty of action or key moments as far as the world of football is concerned. Of course, Inter Milan lifted the Scudetto, but then we witnessed a painful end to the Premier League season for those that are Arsenal fans, as they lost the title to Manchester City, despite beating Everton by 2 goals to 1, because Manchester City on the other side swept West Ham away in a 3-1 victory. Phil Foden being just incredible, as Manchester City lifted their fourth straight Premier League title, the first team to ever win it in 4 consecutive seasons, making it the sixth title in the last 7 years for Pep Guardiola, and overall 6 Premier League titles in his 8 years at Manchester City. Well, his journey with the Citizen does continue on next season, although he does acknowledge that Arsenal are closing the gap on him. In that period, we've also missed Real Madrid lifting their 36th La Liga title, but more importantly, we also missed in the midweek that UEFA Europa League final that saw Bayern Leverkusen lose their first game of the season. Remember, they completed the Bundesliga unbeaten, lifting that title under the charges of manager Xavi Alonso. But then Gian Piero Gasperini with a tactical masterclass, as Atlanta beat up against Bayer Leverkusen by 3 goals to 0. Ademola Lookman scoring a hat-trick in that one. For the English football fans, Ademola Lookman should sound familiar because he did have a stint at Fulham. Well, it was the first major title for Atlanta in as long as they can remember, and of course the first for manager Gian Piero Gasperini, a very, very incredible manager. I've oftentimes wondered why these clubs that keep hunting for managers have not really looked at him or thought about him. Well, we did miss all that, but nonetheless, we are back. Welcome back to the channel. Robert K. Sarkos is my name. Yes, next weekend, June 1st, it is the UEFA Champions League final between Borussia Dortmund and Real Madrid. Of course, Aurelio Tchouameni will miss that fixture for Real Madrid through injury, but then it will be the final game for Toni Kroos, who says he will be retiring from the game of football after the Euros 2024 that are going to be hosted in Germany. This is because Real Madrid have decided not to hand him another contract extension. He had hoped that they would give him at least a 1-year contract extension, but it looks like that's not going to happen. So after the Euros, he will retire from the game of football. Then it will be the last dance for Borussia Dortmund captain in Marco Reus. He had quite the standing ovation and the perfect farewell, so to speak, in their last game of the Bundesliga. So it was quite a good moment there for the Borussia Dortmund legend. But the UEFA Champions League final will be his very, very last game with Dortmund, and they do hope that they can lift that the UEFA Champions League title like they did back in 1997. The last time they made it to the finals was back in 2013 when they lost to Bayern Munich by, I think, 2 goals to 1 in that final. But before all that unfolds, this weekend we do have the FA Cup final between Manchester City and Manchester United. Yes, it is a repeat of last year's again final when Manchester City beat Manchester United by 2 goals to 1 to win the treble. So there's that action. Action kicks off at 5 p.m. East African time. So begin to watch that one. Of course, Manchester United will be without the likes of Harry Maguire through injury, but he's one of those players that I thought have had a fairly good season in the midst of Manchester United's problems. But then the story doesn't end there, because yesterday we did, go to bed with news from The Guardian in the UK reporting that Manchester United do plan on sacking manager Eric Ten Hag regardless of what the result is in this particular FA Cup final. But then today, according to an interview he has done, that's manager Eric Ten Hag, he says yes, Ineos are eager to make changes, and some of those changes have started at the club. Ineos is Sir Jim Ratcliffe's, agents or company that is handling all the footballing matters in clubs where he has a stake. That's in Nice in France, and now in Manchester United. They are the ones handling the business, and he says work has started. He says they are going to turn Carrington, that's the training ground, upside down. I think that gives another validation to that explosive interview that Cristiano Ronaldo did with Piers Morgan about more than a year back that caused a stir around Manchester United. Well, personally, he thought he was being honest. So he says changes are going to be done there, and some changes have already started being made at Old Trafford, where they are doing some stadium repairs, especially on that leaking roof. But more importantly, he does say that Ineos have given him the assurances that they want to build a new project, they want to rebuild everything, and they want to do it with him. So that sort of contradicts the report that we got yesterday from The Guardian, but it is a question of time. Time will tell whether he will stay at Manchester United or he will be shown the exit, especially at the back of the season where they finished their lowest, that is in 8th place in the Premier League, as far as most Manchester United fans can remember in the club's history. So clearly it hasn't really been pretty. If they do sack him, personally, I would understand the justifications and the reasons behind it. But then again, you'll question the decision because of where Manchester United as a club are overall, because he wouldn't be the first. We've seen them sack David Moyes. We've seen them sack Jose Mourinho. We've seen sack their own, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. We've seen all that. So clearly, it looks like that managers are not entirely to blame for some of the things that are not going right. I do remember the days of Jose Mourinho when he finished second with that Manchester United side that had the likes of Paul Pogba, that had the likes of Alexis Sanchez and others, saying that that was the best ever season for him, the highest you could do, and it was a bit of a surprise to himself as well. But most didn't believe him, and well, ever since then, United have sort of been close and far between with different managers. Yes, they did come close again with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but it didn't count for much again. So clearly, it's plenty going on. Away from all that, Barcelona have sacked their manager in Xavi Hernandez. Now, I'm one of those people who adds their voice to Sevilla manager Quique Sanchez Flores, who thinks that Barcelona do not treat their legends really well. I thought that was a mistreatment of Xavi president, that's Joan Laporta. For some reason, does know how to treat club legends with contempt. Because Javi Hernandez, we all remember that he had, said that he will be stepping down from his role as head coach at Barcelona. And then they brought him to the table, convinced him to stay, perhaps made a few promises here and there, pending an end of season meeting that would see a further engagement to those plans. But then yesterday, when they had that meeting, it came out that they had decided to let go of him, to show him the exit in another twist of events. So I thought that was quite embarrassing for Barcelona to do. Whereas they may have disagreed, it could have come out in a PR format for Xavi to say, yes, we did have a meeting, but unfortunately we couldn't come to terms, we couldn't agree on some details or, issues, and I have decided to go ahead with that decision of stepping down from the club. I mean, it would have meant no harm from the club to the club as Barcelona and to Xavi as a club legend, as a former captain, and as a fan long before he even became a player. So he adds himself to the list of the likes of Ronald Koeman, who was also sacked in a very horrible manner, the likes of Gerard Piqué, who left the club and eventually retired at a time when I think he did not want really to retire from football, but it felt like he had been forced out of Barcelona and he had to retire from football because he felt he didn't want to play for any other club at the time. So he didn't leave a very happy man on his Barcelona exit, and yet he had served the club quite well. And then Lionel Messi, we all remember how he left Barcelona and ended up PSG. It was not a good, exit. Barcelona were trying to crunch their numbers financially to see if they can retain him, but somehow, somewhere, I do not think that Barcelona did everything, that they left no stone unturned to try and keep Lionel Messi, and eventually he had to leave in the fashion that he left. And it wasn't really a happy goodbye for the legend, for the star, for the icon of the club that he had been over the years. So clearly, Barcelona, I do question the way they treat their club legends. I'm one of those that adds, because while Quique Sanchez was speaking to the media yesterday, he did question how Barcelona do treat their legends. Well, as soon as they sacked Javi Hernandez, this weekend's game being his last, they went out and stepped in the market. They had already identified their target in former German national team head coach and former Bayern Munich manager in Hansi Flick. He is the man they have wanted all the time, all the while. He has always been the leading contender for the job, although other names like Roberto Di Zerbi and somehow, somewhere, Thomas Tuchel had been discussed in the circles of the club. So, but it is Hans Flick that will be taking over the reins at FC Barcelona. All we can do is wish them the best. I hope it works out for him better than it has done for Javi Hernandez. Remember, Javi Hernandez came midway the season following the sacking of Ronald Koeman, and I thought he did pretty well in his first full season. He lifted the La Liga title, and I think the Spanish Cup. So that was a good return of investment. And then his second season, of course, it hasn't fared really well, but you can hardly blame him because a lot has been happening around the club. And then they've had quite a number of bad injuries. They've gone cold at some point. Of course, they did perform fairly well based on their standards and the squad they had in the UEFA Champions League, and eventually were knocked out by PSG. That was at the quarterfinals. And then, of course, you've had a very incredible side in Real Madrid, who have, I think, lost only one game this season, that were well deserving to be the champions for La Liga this season. So clearly, I do not put all the blame on Xavi Hernandez. And previously, when he announced that he would leave the club at the end of the season, somehow the team had picked up. They went on to win quite plenty of games, and they found themselves back in contention for the title, so to speak. But Madrid were just too good to be caught. So it's all getting heated up in the transfer market for both players, but more importantly for the managers. Again, in that time that we've missed each other, Chelsea have since sacked their manager in Mauricio Pochettino. Now, I must be honest, I did not see that coming. At the start of the season, my prediction was that Chelsea would finish 5th because I thought that was the best they could do. Unfortunately, they could not make 5th, but they did make 6th on the Premier League table. That's where they finished, and I thought winning their last 5 games of the season did them quite good to have them end in where they ended. But when Mauricio Pochettino sat with the technical directors and sporting directors at Chelsea, among his other bosses, they came to an argument that perhaps he's not as progressive as they thought he would be, that something is not working out and all those things. They want a young manager, they want young players, and, more like a copy and paste of the Arsenal project that Mikel Arteta is helping to drive. But it wasn't happening. And interestingly, or surprisingly to me, they did agree to let go of Mauricio Pochettino. If you ask me, yes, I'm not a Chelsea fan, but weighing how things have gone out this season, I do think he has done really well. Yes, it isn't the best that he could do, but I did think he has done incredibly well. And give him another preseason, another season, and Chelsea would be another step forward in getting back to the reigns where we thought they deserve to be. But they did not think that. That's about 5 managers gone through in the last 2 years, last 2-3 years that Chelsea have had, because they've had 3 permanent managers that they've sacked, and then they've had, I think, 2 interims, somewhere in between there. you've sacked, Thomas Tuchel, you've sacked Graham Potter, you've now sacked Mauricio Pochettino. Of course, you had Frank Lampard come to chip in there, that kind of thing. So clearly, something is not working out for these Chelsea American owners. Yes, they want to build something, but it looks like they are being a little impatient. And I did think they were being impatient with Mauricio Pochettino. But anyway, what's done is done. Chelsea are in the market looking at uh, potential candidates, and they are looking at the likes of Enzo Mascara, that's the Leicester City manager that just earned them promotion from the Championship to the Premier League. Then they are looking at Kenny McKenna, that's of Ipswich Town. He also just guided Ipswich to promotion into the Premier League. They are looking at names like there have been mentions of Roberto Di Zerbi of Brighton, because he has also said he has also since part ways with Brighton, but that is not very, very concrete. But then the other leading candidate in the pursuit for that role is none other than Thomas Frank, that's of Brentford. So Brentford, I think, finished 15th on the Premier League table. They didn't have a great season, but they do think he has the potential. Now, if you want a manager like Thomas Frank to come and lead your club, it begs the question, what then happened with Graham Potter? Because Graham Potter and Thomas Frank are two managers in the same caliber, one would think. Yes, their styles of football are different, but they're in the same caliber. So why then did you have to sack Graham Potter? Yes, results were not going for him. You'd have been patient with him. So, but anyway, those are some of the names they are looking at. Of course, it begs the question that why they are not looking at names like Zinedine Zidane, why they are not looking at names like Massimo Allegri. Of course, there are reports. Some reports did indicate that some voices around the club were thinking about maybe a third stint for Jose Mourinho. Maybe Thomas Tuchel had unfinished business with Chelsea, but then new owners say they want a young and progressive manager. So clearly, it looks unlikely that they will think about Allegri, that they will think about Mourinho and Thomas Tuchel. Speaking of Thomas Tuchel, again, in another managerial incident, Bayern Munich have been in search for a new manager for as long as we can remember. Just earlier on in the year, they did announce that they were not continuing with manager Thomas Tuchel and were in the market for a new manager. They wanted Xabi Alonso as a top candidate. They failed to get him because he did commit his future to Bayer Leverkusen. Then they moved their sights to Julian Nagelsmann, who they fired before bringing Thomas Tuchel. And he said, no guys, no thank you, because you fired me and I'm now with the German national team. And he has since committed his future to the German national team. Then they took their attention to Hansi Flick. Now, Hansi Flick was also at Bayern Munich. He was the one that was sacked to then bring in Julian Nagelsmann. And he also said, no, I'm waiting for the Barcelona job. I don't want anything to do with you for now. Then, of course, they had spoken to Roberto Di Zerbi, but nothing was concrete between them. Perhaps the board didn't feel he was the right candidate overall for the club. And then they zeroed down as a last resort to speak to Thomas Tuchel to have him stay. Well, they had the talks and they could not come to terms. They could not agree. And Thomas Tuchel came out to say, yes, I did meet my bosses and the board, but we could not come to terms, and hence I'll be leaving at the end of the season. So Bayern Munich are looking for a manager. Now, reports came in that they had set their sights on Manchester United manager in Erik Ten Hag, because Erik Ten Hag was unsure whether he is staying or he is leaving Manchester United. Up to this day, just like we just discussed, we don't know where the ball will end. So they discussed Erik Ten Hag, but they did not make any major approaches. And ever since then, they have zeroed down on Burnley manager in Vincent Kompany. We all know the kind of football he likes. He likes to pass the ball. He likes possession football. He likes to dominate his opponents. And although the team he has been doing it didn't do it perfectly well last season, but he stuck to his guns and said, this is the style of football I want us to play. And they continue with that. Although they got relegated, his bosses were not planning to sack him. They were willing to give him another year to perhaps play that kind of football, nurture it, and have them promoted once again. Of course, in contrast to the Burnley that we watched this just concluded season, and to that of Shondich that had the likes of Ben Mee, the likes of Chris Wood, Rodriguez, among other players, you could clearly see that the contrast in terms of style of play, that this was a much different Burnley. So Bayern Munich have zeroed down their fingers to Vincent Kompany, and it is looking increasingly likely that he will end up at Bayern Munich perhaps with his assistant in Craig Bellamy, the former Liverpool forward. So Bayern Munich and Vincent Kompany have agreed a deal in principle for him to join them as their new boss, but then the stage things have advanced that the two clubs are now talking about compensation fees to have that progress. So clearly that's the heated transfer market of managers, but it does not end there, because AC Milan in Italy are parting ways with Stefano Pioli. That has been the decision ever since March, according to global football journalist in Fabrizio Romano. Stefano Pioli, who did win them the Scudetto last season, but won. That was, I think, 2021, 2022, because 2022, 2023, it was won by Napoli. So he did win them the league title, but this season things have not really worked out well. A number of clubs are trying to poach some AC Milan players, the likes of Rafael Leao, the Portuguese forward, very, very incredible player. Of course, we all know Olivier Giroud will be leaving the club, and his next destination will be the Major League Soccer and all. So there's quite plenty of things that are happening around AC Milan, and they now do have their sights on Paul Fonseca. Now, Paul Fonseca, the former Shakhtar Donetsk manager, that was between 2016 and 2019. Yes, he was the manager at Shakhtar Donetsk. He then came to AC Roma, had a stint between 2019 to 2021, to 2021, yes, around there, or 2022. And then he left and, of course, joined Lille Metropole in France, where he has been until present day. So AC Milan have their sights on Paul Fonseca as their next manager. In another transfer of managers, Thiago Motta has left Bologna, where he's had an incredible season, guiding them back into the UEFA Champions League for as long as they can remember. He has been now scoped by Juventus. We all know that Juventus showed the exit to their legendary manager in Massimo Allegri, because of the undeserving language that was used, I think, by Massimo Allegri on one of the Italian journalists in there. They had some bitter exchanges. I think as Juventus were winning the Italian version of the FA Cup, sort of they were winning that by 1-0. I think they were beating Atlanta. So anyway, they agreed, they part ways with him. So now they have brought in Thiago Motta as the next Juventus manager. So clearly, as you've heard, managers are moving places. They are the ones making switches from here to there. Like I told you, Brighton are also in the market, searching for their next manager following the departure of Roberto Di Zerbi. Of course, Brighton have had a difficult season, so many injuries to some of their biggest players, the likes of Pavis Estupinan, Kaoru Mitoma, Ivan Ferguson. They've all sort of been in and out of the game, so it has affected their overall performance in the season. They have struggled in the league, while they had engagements in the Europa League, where they performed fairly well for first-timers, so clearly. But he has decided to leave the club, and they will be in the market to search for their next manager. I do know that Ajax are also getting a new manager, but then because Graham Potter said no to Ajax, it begs the question whether Graham Potter could end up returning to Brighton and Hove Albion. We'll wait to see that. Is he holding out for a much, much bigger role? Only time will tell. So clearly, we are wait to see. In France, Luis Enrique will stay on as the PSG manager, having won them, the French League One title, despite missing out on the UEFA Champions League title when they got knocked out there by Borussia Dortmund at the semi-finals. They do think they have a young squad, and Luis Enrique is the right man to lead that young team, to build them and see them advance to the next level. So, plenty of things happening. As far as I'm concerned, at Arsenal, for you, the Gunners, I do not think it's a worry, but yes, it's a concern among a section of fans that Mikel Arteta has only a year left to his contract. Now, he only has a year left to his contract. At the same time, Pep Guardiola has a year left to his contract. It's a public secret that Manchester City have sounded, their thoughts that they would want Mikel Arteta to replace Pep Guardiola in the event that Guardiola does leave the Citizens. So clearly, Arsenal, I know Arsenal and Mikel Arteta is looking like a perfect marriage, but they would want to get that contract situation sorted out, have the manager, handed a contract extension to make it 3 years instead of just one, and see where he leads them next. Because for the last 4 years, perhaps 4.5, he has been building, and he has built a very strong squad. Yes, he needs to continue building that squad, make additions that will help them, have an overall better squad, where if you're missing one key player, whoever replaces them is just as good. The kind of shape that Manchester City have and all that thing. So do it. I do not be worried. He won't be leaving, but at least that's the situation there at that club. As far as Manchester United are concerned, should Erik Ten Hag be let go of course, the top candidates that have been talked about, Thomas Tuchel, who believes he has unfinished business in the English Premier League. Mauricio Pochettino is available. He says he will be willing to take on any job, regardless whether it is in the Premier League or elsewhere. So he is ready to get back into action in there. Graham Potter is well appreciated by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, according to reports from the UK. People like Kenny McKenna have been discussed around those circles. But again, we wait to see what decision Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos will make at the end of today. That is after the FA Cup final. Should we get no key decision in the course of the weekend or early next weekend in regards to Erik Ten Hag's situation at the club, because we all know he also has a year left to his contract, then perhaps he will be staying. But I'll keep you abreast on whatever the news that comes out there. Keep it locked on the channel. I'll be bringing you updates from the transfer window as it progresses. Yes, there's already a lot happening. Unai Emery is targeting Ross Barkley from Luton Town. Ross Barkley did have a very incredible season. He wants to add him to his team. And Newcastle are struggling to keep a hold of Alexander Isak and Bruno Guimaraes. Bruno Guimaraes does have a £100 million release clause triggered. That's between now and I think the end of June, sometime in there. So that's being heated up there. Benjamin Sesko, the RB Leipzig striker, has been sounded as a target for Arsenal. Victor Grokaes at Sporting Lisbon is one of the striking names being discussed amongst different clubs. Victor Osimhen from Napoli wants a move, and Chelsea are reported to be interested. Like I spoke about Rafa Real, some clubs in the Saudi Pro League are interested in his services. Manchester City do want to let go of Matthias Nunes and are looking at they are starting to discuss the possibility of signing Bruno Guimaraes. Initially, they had their search on Lucas Paqueta of West Ham, but Lucas Paqueta is being investigated for intentionally getting booked for, I think, 3 yellow cards in the course of the season, but that dates back to as far back as 2022.